Hi, I'm the Space Quest historian. Let's talk about Gabriel Knight for a second. I don't know if you've seen, but there's this petition going around that says save Gabriel Knight 4 or let's get Gabriel Knight 4. I guess he doesn't really need saving since he's not in any current distress or anything, unless you count being in the legal hands of Activision as some sort of distress, which I guess you could kind of make that argument. Now, the first time I saw this petition, let's get a Gabriel Knight 4, I was a bit like, why? Because let's not mince words. Gabriel Knight 1 was a fantastic game. Gabriel Knight 2 was pretty hilarious. And Gabriel Knight 3 was just a what? What? Believe me, I've tried getting into Gabriel Knight 3. I've started playing that a million times and I've given up just as many times. I don't even get out of the first village. And by the way, let's just be perfectly honest. The Gabriel Knight series was just a complete, total victim of the ass fuckery that went on technologically during the 90s. The first game is by and large the best, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Traditional 2D point-and-click game that was going out of style at the time. The second one was a 6-CD FMV sprawling epic that had to be slashed in half because you can't fit a sprawling epic on just 6 CD-ROMs. And the third one was this butt-fucking ugly 3D polygon nightmare that's just an eyesore to behold. The reason why I think the first one is the best one is because it had the best story. It told a very epic tale that had to do with the entire family history of the Knight family. It tied into the whole voodoo thing. They've lost their talisman and all that shit, and Gabe has to go and find it and restore his family's honor. That's an epic tale. And I would have been quite content with that just being the Gabriel Knight game. I don't think we really needed the second one, although I have played it many, many times, and it's all right. It's a pretty good game. It did kind of suffer from the Monster of the Week X-Files type curse, where the first game had all this family backstory. It had all these things that tied together with Gabe and his family and his relationships and all of that stuff and his family mystery and all that. And the second one was just, okay, we've done voodoo. Werewolves? Let's do werewolves. And the third one, likewise, I'm told is about vampires. Yeah, okay, fine. So now we're just hunting every weird shit you can think of. So at first I was like, why do we need a Gabriel Knight 4? Because I know we like to sort of exalt Gabriel Knight as this pinnacle of adventure game storytelling. And yes, Jane Jensen is very good with researching historical events and tying them into this fictional world that she's done, and she's very good at integrating adventure game puzzles into the story that she's crafted. She's at least one of the best designers that Sierra had on board. I think we can all agree on that in terms of puzzle mechanics tying into the story that she's very good at writing a story that also has puzzle elements in it where the puzzles don't feel like they've been shoehorned in. Let's not talk about the 20th anniversary edition of Gabriel Knight, though, because that was not just a shoehorn. That was a fucking butt plug of unnecessary puzzles. Gabriel Knight's pretty hokey, okay? I'm just gonna come out and say it. It's pretty hokey, schlocky, pulpy kind of storytelling. You've got this prophecy, and you've got a magic talisman, and he's chosen to fight evil, but he's also kind of a dick, and there's a redemption story in there somewhere. It's kind of muddled. I'm just saying, but I guess the question is, the more I think about it, the question isn't really, do we need a Gabriel Knight 4? Gabriel Knight has a lot of fans, and they're very much welcome to him. I personally enjoy the first game tremendously, and I could have done without 2 and 3. But fuck it, if you guys want a fourth, you should have a fourth. And that's what I was thinking. The question isn't, do we need a Gabriel Knight 4? The question is, how do we get a Gabriel Knight 4? And on the bigger picture, why are all these rights still tied up with Activision? the people who somehow ended up with Sierra Online's back catalog after that whole debacle in the late 90s, early 2000s. Of which I'm sure you're aware. They went public, they got bought out, there was a financial scandal, it got shuffled around a million different companies, and then it was all hacked to pieces, and everyone went their separate ways and cried a lot. That's what happened to Sierra Online, and somehow Activision ended up with all of it except for Leisure Suit Larry, which somehow ended up in the hands of Codemasters, and they've been licensing that out, and that's a whole story. But anyway, all, King's Quest, Police Quest, Quest for Glory, Space Quest, all this shit, it all is in the hands of Activision. And they've done fuck all with it for more than a decade, 2 decades. It's wild, the amount of not doing anything they've done. They're quite masterful at doing nothing at this point. The only thing they're doing is selling the collections on Steam and GOG, which is good. I don't think it brings in the high bucks. And they were sort of tiptoeing their waters into, let's restart Sierra Games, let's do a King's Quest. Oh, turns out no one likes it. Well, never mind, let's just fold the whole thing up. It was just one guy in a back office somewhere, turns out, who ran Sierra Games, the new Sierra Games, and they just quietly folded that thing down. Let's not talk about that at all. It's really the question of how do we get the original designers of these beloved franchises to actually work on their beloved franchises again, because Jane Jensen wants to do a Gabriel Knight 4, this is proven. Scott Murphy and Mark Crow want to do another Space Quest, they can't. That's why they did Space Venture, or are doing Space Venture, I guess, depending on when you're watching this video. Jim Walls tried to do Precinct, which is a spiritual successor to Police Quest. Hero U by the Coles was a spiritual successor to Quest for Glory, because they can't do Quest for Glory. I'm just like, okay, so why doesn't Activision just license out, well, the licenses to these indie developers, these indie development houses that have cropped up with, stalwart designers of old. And they kind of did that with Phoenix Online when they did Gabriel Knight 20th anniversary. Let me be clear. Let me be, as if I possibly could, but let me be as clear as I can. I think the rights to Gabriel Knight should be in the hands of Jane Jensen. The rights to Quest for Glory should be in the Coles' hands. The rights to Space Quest should be in the 2 guys from Andromeda's. The rights to Leisure Suit Larry should be in Al Lowe's hands, because apparently he's the only one who knows what to fucking do with it. And, the rights to Police Quest should be in Jim Walls' hands, and not that, just to back this, tie a neat little bow around this. I really don't give a shit about Gabriel Knight 4. I haven't played Grey Matter, but I played a bit of Mobius, and honestly, it's just not my thing. I think Jane Jensen might be suffering a bit from Douglas Adams syndrome, which is that she wrote her best book first, kind of thing, as in Douglas Adams did The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The first book was fantastic, and then subsequent books were just like, I wonder what I got right in the first one. Don't get me wrong, I love all of them dearly, and Jane Jensen is a fantastic writer, there's no denying that, but she did her best work first, and has since been trying to figure out what the hell made the first one so damn good, in my opinion. So anyway, long story short, I do think you should go and sign this petition, regardless of how many fucks you give about Gabriel Knight. Regardless of how many fucks you give about Leisure Suit Larry, Space Quest, Police Quest, all the other series, Sierra series that are so beloved. I think it's more of a principle thing. I think the people who made the stuff, and obviously are still passionate about it, should be allowed to continue that passion. And then if it utterly fails to set the world alight, then that's their prerogative, and that's their failure, and then their responsibility to the fans. It's not up to Activision playing gatekeepers going, well, unless we get 20 million sold, or however much you would consider a success for an indie adventure game, I don't know. Let's just say it's 20 million copies sold, then we're just not gonna, they want like a guarantee up front that it's going to do fantastically, and it's just, no, just license the rights out. Who cares? It's not like, it's not like you're losing money on it. I think the problem is Activision just doesn't give a shit and are pretty much unaware, for the most part, that they are still sitting on these rights. and are just not really interested in doing much of anything with it because it's an indie thing. It's a thing of the past. It's whatever you can throw at the adventure game genre. You know, every epithet and every cursed dooms scenario you can throw at it, which have been thrown at adventure games since the late 90s. So yeah, we can talk about the resurgence of adventure games and storytelling and adventure games and narrative-driven games all you like. It's not going to convince a megalomerate. I almost called them something else. It's not going to convince someone who's got like Call of Duty sales in their eyes, like Cyberpunk 20 whatever the fuck sales in their eyes. It's not going to convince them to pay attention to this tiny little niche, which I think we have to sort of come to terms with the fact that adventure games still are, to this day. Might be growing, might be getting there, but it's not going to be the... it's not going to be AAA titles anytime soon. They're just not interested. So somehow you have to get them interested, and I think maybe, I mean, something has to. So the change.org petition might be something you could do. It's not going to hurt anyone, is it? So go ahead and sign it. Whether you give a shit about Gabriel Knight or not. Was that concise? I don't think that was very concise. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. See you around the Chrono Stream. Bye.